However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls, to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Tonight we've got two turnoffs. It's a really exciting night. In the first hour, I have returning guest Donald Schmitt. He is a investigative UFO researcher and so much more. And in the second hour, we have Sev Tok, who is a contactee and experiencer. So it'll be a nice way to get two different approaches to the UFO extraterrestrial contact discussion. And tonight, I'd like to take the conversation in a slightly different place with Don, because he has been on before and we have discussed Roswell, and of course, it'll always come up. But I think let's dive a little bit deeper into some more speculative aspects, if you will, and I think Don would be okay with that. I didn't tell him beforehand, but here we are. So we'll have Don in just a little bit. And as always, for all of you who are interested in the paranormal, high strangeness, and all of the topics that we cover here on Paranormal Now, if you haven't seen it yet, I posted the documentary Half-Life this past Saturday. We premiered it on YouTube. It was a passion project. And I've gotten really, really amazingly positive responses to it. And I think it's because so many of you are experiencers yourself. So the topic resonated with you in the very human way, even though we're talking about alien contact, life after death, shadow figures, and so on. And in the Half-Life documentary, we weave all that together and tell a story which really the inception for me was a love letter to the paranormal community, a love letter to all the people that I've gotten to meet, and this just amazing place that we spend time in, that for me, it's like a thrill every single day. Like so many of you, you're checking the news, seeing what the latest high strangeness article is, what the new UAP story might be. And, there's something, for me, at least, something kind of meaningful about that. And I suspect that that's true for you as well. And of course, if you are a coffee addict like myself, please get yourself a cup of Alien Coffee Bean. You can get Alien Coffee Bean at aliencoffeebean.com and get a discount, 20% discount in the US by entering the promo code MYSTERY, all caps, MYSTERY20. All right, and now we will bring on the one and only Donald Schmitt. Hey, Don.
Hey, Alan, good to be back with you. Thank you.
Hey, yeah. No, thank you so much for coming on. I guess I was throwing you a curveball. It hadn't occurred to me until as I was saying it. But I am very curious about, some of the more stranger aspects of the UFO phenomena and, your take on that. And for everybody really quick, Donald Schmitt is an expert, and I don't use that word lightly. I don't think it's a word that should be thrown around so loosely. In paranormal investigations and in ufology. I think it should be reserved for those who've really committed lots of work and research. And Don is certainly one of those. And I would say he's an expert in Roswell. And we'll find out, how broad that interest is beyond the nuts and bolts UFO craft tonight. He's the author of The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell and Cover Up at Roswell, exposing the 70-year conspiracy to suppress the truth. So, Don, real quick, just for everyone, for yourself, do you really believe that we recovered a crashed alien craft from Corona, New Mexico, and were there alien bodies, and do you believe in extraterrestrials?
Alan, I always emphasize the fact that I was a skeptic on the very notion that there had been any crash retrievals of devices that may have, originated off the planet, that type of thing. I just couldn't believe that something of that magnitude could be kept a secret for all that time. Secrets tend to leak. Whistleblowers, tend to come forward, and at least it becomes the impetus as far as investigations looking into, the possibility. At the time, I was director of special investigations for the J.Allen Center for UFO Studies in Chicago. And the one case we wanted to go after was Roswell. We were so confident we'd make a single weekend jaunt down to the land of enchantment and prove that it was nothing more than a weather balloon device, as the government still maintains after all these years, or something just as prosaic. And Alan, I can honestly tell you, for having interviewed firsthand witnesses who actually held wreckage in their very hands, and whether it was military or civilian, we came away accepting the fact that, my God, what if they're telling the truth? And then secondly, if they are, we just can't come into this flat-footed with just a mediocre approach. We have to then treat this as if it may indeed be the genuine article. And as a result, we couldn't get back to New Mexico fast enough. And here we are all these years later, where we've to date interviewed over 600 witnesses, either directly or indirectly involved. I've led 5 archaeological digs to the crash site, where we're still searching for the Holy Grail, hardware. And we started I'm one of the co-founders of the museum, the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, which is now attracted over 4 million visitors.
That's crazy.
Over 4 million people.
Amazing. Yeah.
We created a monster. We would have never, and it was only my concern at the time that we would create a facility for the historic preservation of the event.
Right.
It was to make sure that the outside opportunists wouldn't come in and exploit the event, and we were successful in that, and we're one of the biggest tourist attractions in the country as a result. But the first book, UFO Crash at Roswell, was made into the Golden Globe nominated movie Roswell, and so very proud of that. I've had now 7 best-selling books on the case. The book Witness to Roswell was the #1 selling UFO book in the world for 2 straight years.
It's amazing. I think that a lot of this day and age, oftentimes people say, well, I'm so tired of talking about Roswell or this and that. But especially for younger people, I don't know if they truly understand how impactful, like a wave, this story moved across the planet. It was phenomenal. Yeah.
I mean, on Tuesday, July 8th, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield, which was the headquarters of the 509th Bomb Wing, the first atomic bomb squadron in the world. They were elite within the military at that time. It was a composite unit, Alan, where they selected the best officers, the best pilots, the best crewmen, the best doctors, nurses. If you swept the broom on that base back in 1947, it was because you were the best sweeper in the entire U.S. military. But you all had a top security clearance for the atomic bomb. That's what set you apart and above everyone else. So they put out that press release that they had actually captured a flying saucer. And 5 hours later, it was recanted and it was explained away as nothing more than a weather balloon with a radar reflector kite. And that story stood for the next 30 years until the head of intelligence, Major Jesse Marcel, diagnosed with terminal emphysema, broke his oath of silence, and he went public. And he stated, quote, "Being familiar with all materials, both foreign and domestic, this," in reference to the material at Roswell, "this was nothing made on this earth," end quote. Well, how much more profound can you get? And so it's like I'm standing back in judgment thinking, well, these people are either all lying, they're all fantasizing, they're all believing what they'd like to. But in reality, I had to accept the fact that whether military or civilian, they're either all reading from the same script or they're all describing from their own perspective exactly what they witnessed, what they observed, what, as I said at the beginning, held in their very hands.
Yeah.
And who is anyone to say, well, I can't buy it, I can't accept it? Because like even the old Sherlock Holmes axiom, when you eliminate all the possible and are left to accept the impossible,
Mhm.
You have to accept the impossible. And that's exactly the case at Roswell. As fantastic as the story is, that's all we're left with. There are the alternative explanations that we have thoroughly investigated. We have performed due process on everything, right up to even a Japanese atomic bomb. And there's nothing that, comes close to what, again, the eyewitnesses are describing here.
Right. The Twining memo, which came out, I think September 23rd, if I recall correctly.
That's actually, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, that was in the recognition again of exotic craft that was most likely not of this earth, right? And so, why wasn't Roswell mentioned in that? Why do you think that wasn't a part of that assessment?
No, certainly Twining, who was the head of the Air Material Command at Wright Field at that time.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been fully involved with what was recovered in New Mexico. In fact, you'll remember, Alan, that Twining was scheduled to do an inspection of the Boeing plant in Kansas City at that very time. And he had to cancel. And in fact, in the archives, they found the letter that he sent to the president of Boeing, explaining that due to a very important matter that had just had arisen in New Mexico, he had to cancel the inspection.
Yeah.
So he's on his way to New Mexico. Well, we knew he landed not in Roswell, but he landed in Alamogordo at Holloman Field. And I think mainly for the reason that everyone would have recognized him. He was already a 4-star general.
Interesting. Yeah.
That they didn't want to take the chance. So he would have been observing from an outside perspective, but nonetheless, he was there.
Yeah.
Now, Roswell was explained away that same afternoon as the original press release.
Right.
Claiming they captured one. We got one. Now, the Twining letter, Twining did not write that. He signed off on it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and this was in response to General George Shogren, who was with Research and Development in Washington under General Curtis LeMay. Now, it was in response to a letter he had received from the FBI. The FBI wanted to have access. They were wondering what was going on, how come they were essentially shut out, and especially after the situation in New Mexico. They were questioning, and they were asking for an estimate of the situation. They were asking for an assessment. So the letter that Twining signed off on, and he would not have signed this if he disagreed with any sentence, any paragraph of this document. He agreed to every word that was in that document. Otherwise, he wouldn't have signed it. Now, what's curious about it, now this is just 2.5 months after Roswell. Roswell's been explained away. At the moment, you have a flurry of reports that summer of 47, you had banner headlines from the Kenneth Arnold sighting from June 24th onward, leading up to Roswell. You would have thought the country, we were being invaded. And yet then everything drops off immediately after Roswell, okay? But the point being, they had a few fuzzy photographs. They had many reports. Nothing's been investigated at this point because who is going to do the investigation? There's no project. There's no committee. There's nobody assigned to look into this. So Twining does this letter. He signs off. It's an assessment. It admits the phenomenon is real and not visionary or fictitious.
Fictitious. I love that word, not fictitious. Right. That's a very, very direct word. It's right. Yeah.
And it's from the very head of Air Material Command. They're responsible for all air traffic. If a MiG fighter should have come in our airspace at that time, it would have been AMC who would have been responsible as far as providing a full report and then explaining how this even happened, how one managed to even come within our airspace. So here it was a situation where you have unknowns that are coming in the sovereign American airspace for weeks. And the public as well as Capitol Hill was demanding to know, what is this? Are we responsible? Is this our technology, or is it someone else's? And so Twining signs off on this letter. Now, the key thing, and most of my colleagues aren't even aware of this, Alan, that when you go, because all we see are the reproduced, typed up copies of the letter. You don't see,
That's
you
true.
never see the original. We have copies of the original from the National Archives.
Yeah.
We see who actually prepared the document. Now, I want you to think of this for a moment. I want to see if you come up with your own, you're able to surmise why these people were called in to provide this assessment. They are 2 generals and 2 engineers, all 4 of them specializing in technology, hardware, propulsion, propellers, materials, metallurgy. Okay? Now, I mentioned, all you have are some reports. All you have are a few fuzzy photographs. Why are you calling on hardware people, technology people, propulsion people, unless you actually have something in hand?
Something that deals with propulsion.
Precisely. Yeah. So Twining is relying on these 4 who wrote this assessment. He signed off on it. Okay. Now you can, I'll be happy to even send you a copy of that, so you could look up who these people are and the fact that their backgrounds. 2 of them are generals, and the point being that they seem to be fully cognizant of the entire flying saucer situation at that time. Now, what provided them with that advantage? That information, okay? And then you have to also point out is that the letter was not top secret. It was a secret document, which means that it would have had lower access, lower accessibility, lower rank officers would have been privy to it. So you would not have included information that would have been regarded as top secret. And certainly at that time, Roswell, until you find out what is going on, until you're able to determine what and who and why, you have no answers. It certainly would have been probably the most classified matter concerning the Pentagon at that time. So to me, there's no reason to mention this in a letter that was going to a brigadier general and then assimilated to the FBI. They do not have a need to know.
Why do we find ourselves in the same situation today? I feel like we're in the same. It's the same dialogue.
You couldn't be more spot on, Alan. And I think that's where, for those of our colleagues who don't know history, they see this as something revolutionary. They see this as disclosure, even if it's with a small. They see that they feel as though we're dealing with new players in the game, and yet we're dealing.
Which I would say is true. I mean, technically speaking. But as the chain of command has, the gauntlet has been handed off. One of the things that, and for our meetings at the Pentagon and people that we are still in contact with the Pentagon, one of the 2 things that truly rub them the wrong way. One is that many of the high-ranking officers of the Pentagon feel that the old order did not pass down the information to the new. That they took it with them. It's been our experience with Roswell, for example, that many of the key witnesses, they didn't say a word even to their families. They died with the truth. They took it with them to their very graves. And the other problem, Alan, is that whenever I'm asked today, where is the evidence? Where's the wreckage? Where's all the debris, all the artifacts that they were testing all those years? And I am quick to point out that our military/government doesn't manufacture anything. Everything is assimilated into the private sector, and then they bid out as far as every tank, every ship, every plane. And as a result,
when I'm asked, and it's because we have had now first-hand witnesses at Boeing, at Lockheed, at Battelle, at Rand, at Hughes Aircraft, at General Electric, at Bureau Standards, at Los Alamos, all talking about their failed efforts in reverse engineering the wreckage from Roswell. So I say the government/military lost control of the evidence many years ago. They probably don't even know where much of it presently is. That presently it's practically all under the control of private corporations, the military-industrial complex, if you will. And as a result, they're now in a situation where they're pretty much in as much in the dark as we are.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So the private sector has the power.
Yes.
They have control over the big secret. Now, last week, Rick Doty was on the program, and he was discussing that he saw footage taken of what he called EBA, extraterrestrial biological entity, a gray-looking alien,
Right.
and other materials. To me, it does make sense, even back in 1947, that they would document what they found.
Every inch, right.
So, where is the document? Do you think that what Rick says that he saw is related to Roswell?
Okay, and I was going to get to this because you had also, the original question was even regarding the bodies recovered.
Sure.
Now we have a score of both firsthand military and civilian, which would also involve the sheriff in Roswell, as well as deputies, a fire crew chief, as well as other firemen, all witnesses to the bodies, as well as a survivor. There was a survivor at Roswell. We have additional first-hand witnesses at a hangar. It was called P3. It's building 84, where the wreckage and the bodies all transited through. Down to a man, even the men who were posted as guards inside, outside, those who were told that that it was off limits, that fatal as far as measures could be taken, anybody getting too close to the building, that type of thing. So men who were there to enforce, that law, for example, those who were at the base hospital, even nurses who were involved. And so they pretty much all have demonstrated that, yes, there was a survivor. And so if as you mentioned, as far as Rick, and I know, and I've heard this before, that he claims that he saw footage. And I, for one, would have to say, well, it could very well have been the survivor from Roswell. If it was genuine, if legitimate, the real thing, then who am I? Again, if I say there was a survivor at Roswell, I have to accept the possibility that there was much film footage as far as of this entity.
There are a lot of civilians who have had close encounter contact with what they believe to be extraterrestrial or otherwise, not of this earth, non-human, exo-consciousness. Do you believe that the abduction phenomena is real, and if so, what do you think it is?
I'm more concerned as to the origin, in that even Dr. Hynek, when I worked with him, he often, as an astronomer, he had such a difficult time dealing with the distances from A to B. The idea that you had physical craft that were traversing as far as these distances, when you consider that our nearest star, Alpha Centauri, is 4.3 light years.
Yeah.
And he would use the analogy, especially to his students at Northwestern University, that if the distance from the Earth to the moon would equal the thickness of a single playing card in a deck of cards, not the width, but the thickness, would equal the distance from the Earth to the moon. And then he would pose the question, how many playing cards to equal the distance from the Earth to Alpha Centauri? And nobody could even come up
Imagine
with
it. Yeah.
19 miles of playing cards. Now, just imagine that. Just, the Earth to the moon is 3 days, and then the idea that 19 miles of playing cards. It's beyond comprehension.
But then if we're talking about ETs visiting here, there has to be some room to entertain that there's other ways to get here, right?
Absolutely, and that's where we're going here. It was actually the last time that I was with Dr. Heine. We had dinner together, and I'll never forget the way he pounded his fist on the table. And here was an astronomer that had finally had to accept. He went, "Don, it's smacking more and more of nuts and bolts." The idea that you go across the street, kick the tires, that type of thing. And then one has to question, what means of travel or what interaction within our own reality could account for the fact that it does materialize and it does take on physical characteristics. It's able to break tree branches, make depressions in the ground, swirl grass, create physiological effects on the witnesses, or abduct human beings, abduct people. Okay? And so the one theory that immediately stepped to the fore was interdimensional. Something that is around us, it's able to slip in and out. And when it does slip into our dimension, our reality, it becomes nuts and bolts. It can crash here. It can be then locked here where it can't go back. And as a result, you have, the remains of an actual ship, that type of thing, and bodies. Or, as so often described, that it seems to, even when you photograph it, that it slips away. All of a sudden, now you see it, now you don't. Where did it go? That type of thing. And so we've had just a tremendous amount of reports through the decades that suggest that this is something much closer to our own reality, our own existence, and that it is able to slip in and out at will. That may account for why so many through the years have talked about, it's like we're dealing with ghosts, we're dealing with phantoms, we're dealing with something almost supernatural, we're dealing with something paranormal, we're dealing with something that it's like it's playing a joke on us one moment, and then it's picking us up and treating us like tagged animals another. And so I have to always step back, and it's like I always remind journalists, even after you dismiss an individual for whatever reason, you need to still step back and say or ask, what if this person is telling the truth? And I think that defines, I think that defines a most objective, legitimate reporter, a journalist, writer,
right?
Because we can put things in our gray basket. We can always go back and re-examine things when we've accumulated more information, more knowledge based on, that situation. But for those who just very tacitly just dismiss something just because they have their own preconceived theories, I think that's far from legitimate science. In fact, if anything, it's very faulty science. So getting back to the abduction situation, sure. I know Betty Hill very well. I know Travis Walton very well. There are a number of other cases. Unfortunately, I would suggest, Alan, that it tends to be a much smaller number than we would like to believe. Unfortunately, and we used to sit down with Bud Hopkins all the time, the late Bud Hopkins, and beg him not to write everything, not to release everything, not to print and publish everything, because you need to hold on to a control sample that you can go back to and compare notes with over and over again. And I'm afraid we've all been thoroughly contaminated. We've all read things, we've all seen things on television and in movies, and as a result, I think we could hypnotically regress most anyone. And under the right coaching and leading questions, we would most likely describe an abduction experience. So I'm afraid it's become quite muddied as a result, and that's unfortunate.
I mean, I agree. How do you not see anything alien related. It's virtually impossible.
At this point, yes.
At this point, yes. So, but I know Kathleen Marden says that there are certain methodologies they still try to employ, ask certain questions that still haven't been reported, commonalities. I don't know what system she uses exactly, but she does try, right, to
Absolutely.
authenticate an experience. Now, I think that why can't it be nuts and bolts and interdimensional? I mean, maybe one day humans will figure out how to slip in and out of dimensions, right?
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
why I described that interdimensional would account for both. The idea that it's a matter of just, and even our own scientists concede that we have a fourth dimension and a fifth and a sixth. I don't know how they distinguish between going from a fourth to a fifth, that type of thing. But
Hmm.
knowledge that there is another dimension even beyond our own
Yeah.
is to concede that there is another existence, that there's something even within our very presence, that if again it's their mode of perception that they are able to slip in and out. And when they slip, when you enter the third dimension, then it
Hmm.
will appear as though you are part of that dimension. As a result, you are as physical as anyone existing
Yeah.
within that dimension. So
Yeah, I'd certainly like to believe that's the case. That it would be almost natural
yes.
to go in between, right?
Hmm.
So that begs the question then: what other phenomena does Don Schmitt entertain beyond extraterrestrials?
um oh, I've had through the years, if there's a local Bigfoot sighting, the
Uh
sheriff's department, I said, why are you calling me?
huh. Where do you think they're coming from, Don?
Because you're into that. No, I'm not into that. Well, I think we're all curious as
Sure.
to any mystery. I love the idea, and I should mention, Alan, that the one thing that even got me started on all this
Hmm.
was I was a young boy home with my mother. My dad was away on business, but that weekend of November 22nd, 1963.
Okay.
And then when the warrant report came out, the government investigation under the Judge Earl Warren, and all the words, even from the media, calling it a whitewash and cover up. And it was a few years later, when I was already, a I couldn't read enough. For Christmas, what do you want for Christmas? And I'd list off different book titles.
Hmm.
And I happened to be going through the book racks at a department store, and there was this book using those very same words: whitewash, cover
Yeah.
up. And it was called Flying Saucers Serious Business. And that was the beginning. And I couldn't get my next UFO book fast enough. And there was one particular chapter in that book entitled Who's Driving? And they were occupant
Mm.
reports. And I was just, because I have 2 degrees in art, I have an advantage. And I learned this from our chief investigator at the Center for UFO Studies, who was formerly our chief investigator, Alan Hendry. He's a tech writer now. He was at Hughes Aircraft. And he would describe that when he would work with intelligence agents, whether FBI, CIA, they would tell him that their best agents had art backgrounds, because the advantage is we hear everything three-dimensionally. We have a movie going in our head
Mhm.
constantly. Someone describes something to us where other people just write down notes. We're running a movie in our head. We're
Interesting.
visualizing.
Huh.
And it's a tremendous advantage. And it's the one thing that Dr. Heineck would always point out, that where I would work with him, even like a police artist, and I'd be sketching what witnesses were describing when we work in the field together. And so I have had that as a major advantage. And whenever I hear anyone describe like a ghost story, for example, to me. And I've had a few experiences. After my father passed away, I mean, I truly had some experiences that I have no doubt. I have absolutely no doubt. And what's interesting is that when I get together with UFO colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them with PhDs and just tremendous amount of experience and education in their respective fields, and I'll never forget mentioning after my father passed away what had happened, and then one by one, they're all describing their own individual experiences, nothing to do with UFOs. And so, like Dr. Hynek, we notice that we have to note the fact that so many of these other topics, they do overlap. They overlap in the sense that we as human beings, we have that same perception capability.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are not trained observers. And it's one of the reasons that when someone has a genuine and especially a profound UFO experience,
Yeah.
you then ask, okay, would I have reacted the same way? Was it a typical human response? Or does it suggest someone that overly reacts, is emotionally imbalanced, is a UFO buff, and as a result, they're always out peering up at the stars, seeing UFOs, for everything that moves in the nighttime sky, that type of thing. So, as investigators, we wind up investigating the witness more than the UFO.
Mm-hmm.
UFO is a fleeting thing. Now you see it, now you don't. That's the wonderful thing about Roswell, because you have wreckage, you have physical remains, you have hardware, and something that there's a long chain of evidence from the eyewitnesses all the way to the different facilities where the materials were tested.
But
Now,
do we, Don? Do we have, not the government, does someone else outside of the government have any kind of, to your knowledge, wreckage?
well, I was talking earlier about the private sector.
Well, let's exclude those. 'Cause that's top secret. I mean, does Bigelow actually have a piece? Are there pieces out there somewhere?
We've been discussing Bigelow in just the last number of days, in that we need to put some pressure on him. He's been strangely quiet through all of this. And yet all the fingers, whether it's Lou Elizondo or Kit Green or Chris Mellon, all pointing, even the late Senator Harry Reid, all pointing at Bigelow Aerospace. Okay. But yet, let me mention, when we had a piece of metal, a fragment, recovered from the Roswell debris field. And at the time, we went to Dr. Hal Puthoff.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, Dr. Puthoff could not do the radioisotope tests. So that's when he referred us to another lab. But before that, he had referred us to Bigelow. Now, I joke about, I knew Robert Bigelow when he was just a multimillionaire. So Bigelow, a lot of his roots go all the way back to Roswell around 1990, 1991. And the problem was within the UFO field, at the moment he became involved, everybody and anybody started hitting him up for grants and special funding. And I confidently can say we never did. We never asked him for a dime, but everyone else did. And it really drove him underground in short order. And that's when he was being more selective in who he was working with. And the fact that if these private corporations, and specifically Bigelow Aerospace, I mean, the idea that it's been named would be the reason I would look the other way, because it becomes a diversion, a distraction. Why would you even name a specific? It'd be no different than if someone within, a high government position would say, well, the bodies from Roswell are still at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. to me, it becomes almost like an Area 51. It becomes a great spokesman.
Gotcha. Okay.
And yet, where 51 is highly secured, Bigelow Aerospace, as much as he would have security, it's still not a government facility. It's a private corporation. And so you have workers that are not under government sworn,
they don't swear their life on the government, basically, right?
There are no threats that they could actually execute that a government and a military, certainly in threatening personnel, has a long history of doing. So I feel that, Harry Reid, again, he made the comment also about Lockheed, that he had heard that some of the wreckage was also at Lockheed. Okay, that's great, because we already have a firsthand source at Lockheed regarding Roswell material. And yet, when the report from the Pentagon went to the Senate Intel Committee last June, you will note that they only went back to 2004.
Yep.
So there was no phenomenon prior to 2004.
Rather convenient, sure.
Too convenient. And to me, it immediately demonstrated that they were containing this in the contemporary. They were keeping it as close to the present state of technology, that it at some point they ever would need to still fall back on either Russia or China. They could do that. If you go back to the 40s, there's no way you can pin this on Russia or China.
Sure.
And the point being, if it's a threat to national security today, it wasn't back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and thereon. So the point being, they are being especially careful about acknowledging hardware, because the moment anyone brings up physical evidence, what's the first thought that comes to mind? Roswell.
Right.
And the moment they concede Roswell to any extent, genie's out of the bottle.
Right. You can't say, "Oh, I have a piece of craft and where was it recovered?" Can't tell you that.
Yeah, back in the 40s. Oh, back in the 40s. Yeah, and it was beyond our technology back then. Well, Russia was, half destroyed by Nazi Germany, and China was a third world country back at that time. So
yeah. Although, don't you think we have to kind of rule out Russia, considering what's going on in Ukraine?
Yes.
I just don't think that they even got there in the first place. But they don't have the financing right now, and the technology is clear. Yeah.
In fact, as we both remember that with the summits, as far as with President Reagan and Gorbachev, that in Reagan proposing SDI, as far as Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars,
yeah.
We basically just, we outspent them. There was no way that the Soviet Union was going to be able to keep up as far as to that extent, and as a result, they folded their cards. It's over. I'll never forget, and I've lectured in Moscow. I even had dinner with two of the cosmonauts, and their fascination and their level of questioning just regarding Roswell was more than I expected. It was like they were coming at this with total ignorance, that it wasn't. And I would bring up things regarding, and it's like, it wasn't like, how do you know that? Or who told you about that? It was clearly, I had to inform them. I had to give them details about their own cases, that we had more information here than they ever, were allowed to see. But I'll never forget, I'm a member of the EAA in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And we had the Raptors, the F-35s.
Okay. Yep.
And it was amazing what they were able to do. And I talked to two of the pilots afterwards, and I just point blank asked, do the Russians have anything on us? And they both laughed and went, not even close.
Not even close.
That's the point. That's the point. I mean, I hear this constantly, that as much as, and I think it was mainly a gimmick as part of the Cold War, that if we're going to have an adversary, granted, I mean, they certainly have the biggest rockets. And I never forget when the Nuclear Museum in Albuquerque had the Topaz 2 reactor. It was the second largest nuclear rocket reactor in the world. Well, it was second to the Topaz 1, which was also Russian. Well, the reason they had the biggest rockets was because they had the greatest distance as far as in,
that's where the resources went. Sure.
Precisely. Right. And whereas we were on their doorstep as far as in Eastern Europe, we were right there. So again, we have to know our history. We have to study as far as the world situation. And you're absolutely correct, Alan, that even by today's standards, there's I've been to China 3 times, and I've seen their aircraft fly around. I was there during a time when they were conducting exercises over Chongqing, where I was staying on one occasion. And I thought, my God, these are 20-year-old outdated fighters. And granted, I'm sure they have things under wraps just like we do, but again, no.
Well, I think that would be the next question would be, is it possible that they just put all the resources, or some group of engineers or scientists managed to figure something out we didn't? Whether they have more money or not, been doing it longer or not. I mean, maybe could someone have accidentally, or not accidentally, but, developed a technology that is so far advanced, and obviously they wouldn't share that if that were the case. Especially,
we wouldn't.
Yeah. But you don't think your suspicion is that it's not China?
No, and also for this reason, and I experienced it and I saw it, and I was able to talk to government officials, especially when I was in both Shanghai and in Beijing. They are notoriously the biggest copycats in the world. That whatever I saw as far as technology, it was like, that's from us. That's from us. They got that from us. And I was surprised, for example, when I was assisting them consulting on a museum project. And I was talking to engineers, I was talking to electricians, I was talking to people that would be involved at a level that we would have people involved in designing aircraft, for example. And I was talking about composites, and I was talking about fiberglass, and I was talking about carbide materials and things. I was talking about even certain lighting and laser technology, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And granted, it was just a small sampling of people, but the idea that they didn't even know what fiberglass was. Now, granted, I mean, I'm sure they lead very shielded, very protective lives, and that they only know what the government provides them.
Do we know?
That we know, but I'm not going to deny or argue the point, but all I know is, even based on statements, for example, that our military has technology that would make a James Bond movie look dated. Okay.
Sure.
That one statement I had one officer tell me. The Raptors, for example, to see them come in at high speed and then turn their noses up and then just sit there, bobbing on their thrusters as they're hovering, and all at once kick in the afterburners and shoot up like a rocket. I mean, just amazing. You stand there in awe and feel the ground shaking beneath you. And thank God those are ours.
Well, I'd seen something myself. We were driving on the highway one day, and I just see something up to the left, and it's a multi-lane highway. So it looked like it was floating, but if something is moving away from you and you're moving towards it, it might seem stationary.
Right.
But as I started going past it, it still seemed, rather hovercraft-like. But then I was like, oh, this looks like an airplane. And I didn't know what kind of airplane it was. I couldn't look too long at it because we're driving, and I couldn't pull over. There's too many cars left and right. But it was a plane that seemed to be hovering, and I didn't hear any sound. And the weird thing is, I didn't notice any, and this is at nighttime, so I didn't notice any like jet flames of any sort.
Right.
but it like nothing went off in me that said, oh, that's an extraterrestrial UFO. It looked very Earth made, whatever that jet was. And maybe it was something similar or something that they were testing. I don't know,
See, allow me to add another point. And again, when you study your history, and when Japan was at war with China prior to World War II, and if not for our own Air Force pilots, unauthorized, the Flying Tigers who went over, and in their efforts to train the Chinese, and to go to the museum there and to see their failed efforts in that, and the constant complaint that these people have no concept of defending themselves.
Yeah.
Okay? And as a result, I'm wondering how you jump that, that dilemma, that obstacle that is, bred through centuries. Yeah. And as a result, where do we ever see examples of a Chinese Air Force that demonstrate any even capability of matching anything we have in the sky? Because there's nothing. I mean, where have we ever seen China at war? Except that we had to always go to bat for them. We had to defend them.
Well, that's a good point, and you're right. I mean, much of their technology and many things are imitative, because they did the fast game. They wanted to speed up and catch up.
Yes.
And the easiest way to do that would be to mimic and emulate and take current tech and try to replicate it, rather than invent something new.
Right. And but you use a good word, and that's mimic. And one of the things that they have been working on for many years now is mimicking the human body, mimicking and creating. As far, I think if there's one area that they may be superior to anyone else, and that's AI, artificial intelligence, and creating as far as a full army of robots, if that should ever be the case. And so much of the robotoid technology is coming out of China.
Sure.
And to me, I don't see any examples as far as militarily that they are even trying to play catch up with us, as much as they're still using old fighters from 25, 30 years ago.
Right. They're saying, okay, we've only got so much resources. Why don't you guys keep spending money on big, heavy things, and we're going to focus on software, which is, and hardware, but that's much cheaper.
Oh, yes.
To develop than the heavy hardware that we spend money on.
I observed much of the attempts at Westernization in recent years, and you see the streets, which before were flooded with bicycles and scooters, motorcycles. They're all fancy new cars, and the shopping malls, with all the exclusive leather shops and jewelry and things. And now they've reeled that back. They've clamped down on that again. I'm in regular contact with friends and colleagues in China, and it's as though they're digressing. They're going back to the old hardliners in that regard, and that too would stifle technology.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, no UFOs out of China that we are aware of.
No.
And it seems, would you agree that the UAPs that we're seeing now, when I say that, I refer to anything captured by the military or government, is that the same tech that we saw or heard about in 1947, 1950s, 1960s?
These are all trained, highly experienced pilots, radar operators, people who were, shipside, that type of thing. They all describe the same situations. It comes down to, for me, why now? Why disclosure? Why any admission? Where they were so tight-lipped, even when you consider through the course of the 3 official investigations of UFOs, Project Sign, Project Grudge, and the most famous Project Blue Book. When Blue Book was declassified in 1977, and there were over 13,000 cases, there were only a handful of Navy. So you mean the Navy was never investigating this?
Mm-hmm.
They have much greater, surveillance and coverage of the planet than the Air Force does. They would have been able to monitor as far as situations in other countries way beyond our own Air Force, that type of thing. And so it comes back to that the Air Force for too many years spoke for all branches. And I'd like to believe that the Navy finally said, you're no longer speaking for us. Our pilots, our other personnel are having these experiences, and we don't know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with aircraft that defy the laws of physics. And I like the fact that they emphasize that.
Yeah.
That is beyond, our technology.
I just got a message, and it says that Chinese are concentrating their military mission on naval power to control the Pacific Rim. And Ufi in YouTube said, FYI, sources indicate that China has over 100 nuclear submarines, 20 to 40 more than U.S. So that's another area where they are, focusing their efforts. Done. Before we go, if there's one other mystery within the realm of paranormal that you could freely spend your time on, what would it be?
I think it's because I have focused all these years, on this one topic.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think time travel.
Okay, interesting.
Whether it's possible, and yet especially when I lecture in front of young people, and I'll tell them, I'll suggest that the next time you go out under a starlit sky, look out, peer out, and stare out as deep as you can, and consider that you're looking back in time, that many of those stars, as you see them, stopped existing. They may no longer exist for 1,000,000 years.
Right.
You're seeing them as they were 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 years ago. So every time we look into the stars, we are looking back in time. So as Einstein was correct, time truly is relevant. It just happens to be where dependent on where you are. And as a result, to go back in time, relive and re-experience situations, and see who if Lee Harvey Oswald really did kill John F. Kennedy, were there other gunmen involved, for example?
Yeah. I almost feel like if we could do that, if we can just look through a window and not interfere, right? That would be the ideal way to do it. Don, where can people find out about you and your books?
Well, all the books, and the current one is the revised edition for the 75th anniversary of Roswell, Witness to Roswell, is presently available at Barnes & Noble, all fine bookstores, and certainly at Amazon, and also through the International UFO Museum and Research Center. And our website is presently being rebuilt, but I'm also on Facebook at Donald Raymond Schmitt.
All right.
And I respond to all inquiries and all questions and comments on Facebook. So,
okay, Don, thank you so much for coming on again. It's an absolute pleasure.
Look forward to it. We'll do it again, Alan. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Take care, Don. Have a good night. All right. And thank you all for hanging out with us and Don on this wonderful evening. It is beautiful here in the Northeast. It's just a low humid day. And I'm just utterly grateful for the natural surroundings that we have now outside of New York City, although I do miss the city on occasion. Coming up in the second hour is Sev Tok. And we're going to go deep down the rabbit hole for some of you. But for many of you, this will be something that you can relate to as experiencers. And I think that Sev will bring something to the table at Paranormal Now that you really haven't heard before. So hang in there until we come back on the other side of this break. And when we do, I will be offering 2 free tickets to the UnX Network, the X Conference 2022, which is from May 13 to May 14. It's a virtual conference. It has Micah Hanks, Margie Kay, Lee Spiegel, Ray Hernandez, Jimmy Church, Wayne Lawrence, Lisa Martin, Whitley Strieber, Katie Grabowski, Debbie Zegelmeyer, and Dan Terry. So it's an amazing lineup, 2 free tickets. But the first 2 people to answer the question that I asked when I come back on the other side of this break, the first 2 people to comment in either Facebook or YouTube will get those tickets. You just have to send me your email and we'll get them to you. All right. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on Paranormal Pop YouTube channel, rebroadcast on the UnX network. We'll be right back on the Inverted Upside Down. This coffee is delicious. Is that a UFO? I'm actually seeing a UFO. This coffee is awesome. That's why they call it alien coffee bean. Is this even made on Earth? Hey all. Paranormal Now will be syndicated on the UnX network, the new mainstream, where you can find your favorite hosts and shows on the cutting edge of ufological and paranormal news and topics. Listen for Paranormal Now rebroadcast on the X at 2 a.m. EST Fridays, 11 p.m. PST Thursdays at unxnetwork.com. Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your most grateful host. Thank you for joining us tonight. The first hour, we thank Donald Schmitt, UFO investigator specializing in Roswell. And then this hour, we have the one and only Sev Tok joining us in just a moment. But now's the time. If you want to win 2 tickets to the X conference, May 13 to 14, 2 free tickets. You have to answer this question. And I was trying to figure out what question to ask, and I thought to make the playing field as fair as possible would be to offer an easy question. So this is really, I think, for most of you, more about how quickly you can type. So the only question is, what was the name of the rancher that discovered the debris in the Roswell, Corona, New Mexico crash? And I'll stand by and see who we get coming in here on YouTube and on Facebook. I don't see any answers yet. Come on, we can do this. 2 free tickets. All right. In the meantime, let's bring on Sev Tok and we'll see what your responses are. Sev, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Good evening, Alan, and hello everyone who's tuning in.
Thank you, Sev, for joining us tonight. I'm so glad that you're here because you do have a unique story to bring. Just very quickly, Sev's ET contact started at age 10, which she kept secret until 2017 when Grays burned red X marks into her back. This ET contact prompted her to, quote unquote, come out in 2018 as a speaker at AlienCon, and through her book, You Have the Right to Talk to Aliens, endorsed by renowned UFO researcher Kathleen Marden, and she's currently working on her next book, Alien Wisdom, and you can find out more about Sev at planetsev.com. I love the planetsev.com. It just flows. It's perfect.
Oh. Thank you. Do you know why I named it planetsev.com? Yeah. Okay. There's two reasons.
Sure, good.
Okay. The first reason is I just see everyone as their own planet with their own rules and regulations and flora and fauna and biosystems. And also, a few years ago, my best friend Cecilia was dating a writer, and he got a job writing a short story for Star Wars. And he said to me, Sev Tok, I like your name. I'm going to name a planet after you in my story. And I didn't believe him, but
Okay.
in the Star Wars galactic system, there's a Sev Tok star system and a planet. And I'm in Wikipedia.
That's very cool. I love it. And just really quickly, if I get this right, correct me in the chat section, everyone. It looks to me like Genghis Khan was number 1 and number 2, Aaron Tyson, both with Mac Brazel. So congratulations, as long as I'm correct, that you are the first 2. And just shoot me an email, either Alan@paranormalnow.com, or just message me on Instagram, and Paranormal Now will get those tickets to you. That's awesome, guys. Sev, you so recently, speaking of conferences, opened up in a sense.
Yeah.
Why are you sharing what for some would be, I don't know if terrifying is the right word, but certainly a scary thing to share with regular, we'll call them quote unquote normies.
Before I give you that answer, I want to say something.
Yeah, sure.
How much I love your movie, Half-Life.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I sat the whole thing straight through. And the topic, when was the first time you realized that the paranormal is real? And the stories that everybody had was so interesting to me, because we've seen some of these people before in the UFO world on interviews and as interviewers. These are some maybe celebrities or well-known faces, and listening to their really personal, emotional stories made me feel like I knew them better, and also just illuminated a light on them as to why they're doing what they're doing. It makes sense when you hear their stories.
Yes, thank you so much for that endorsement from you, Sev. Really, that's just
And you did it with, is it your wife or your partner? I can't pronounce
my wife, Tsvete, and in fact, she's a neighbor from Bulgaria originally.
She's my grandmother always said I have Bulgarian blood in me.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, the both of you did a beautiful job on that movie.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It's when I watch it even now, like you said, there are certain stories that, like even as I'm editing it, like that get like emotional and teary eyed, and because there really is something profound going on here, and the paranormal plays a major part in so many people's lives. So I assume with you, it was a major paradigm shift as well.
Oh, yes. It's been a part of my life, my knowing of the paranormal ever since I can remember, my earliest memories. And I think my paranormal or my psi abilities were strengthened when I came to America as a little girl. My parents and I did, from Istanbul, and we didn't know English. And I didn't know English when I started first grade. So in order to understand what was happening, in order to just read people, I did a lot of that, and I had a lot of practice in that. So people wonder, do your psi abilities increase when you have ET contact? Or do the ETs want you because you have advanced psi ability? I don't know which one it is, but there does seem to be a correlation.
Well, tell us a little bit about your story, so those who are listening can have a better sense.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, my first conscious memories are from age 10. Can you
Sev,
see me?
you dropped. Sev, if you can hear me, you dropped out a little bit. Can you start again? Sev, is anyone else having an issue with connection, or is it just on my end? Because I think it's Sev had frozen. Yep. Okay. It looks like her browser is refreshing. Oh, there we go, Sev. We got you back.
Okay. All right. I hope I can stay on. Sorry about that.
No, we'll keep going.
Okay. So my first conscious memories are from age 10 to 12, and where I was visited by a being several times. And he would come in a spaceship. I'd be outside waiting for him. And in this big spaceship, he would land, he would come out, and he looked like a young man with dark hair and dark clothes. His ears were just a little bit more almond shaped. That was pretty much the only difference. And he was checking up on me. And I was always so happy to see him because it felt like I was seeing a brother. And then each time I would just come to in my bedroom, confused, not understanding what happened because my space brother felt more real than my bedroom. But I just decided I'm just going to forget about it and get dressed and go to 5th grade and not tell anybody about this. I could have told my parents because they were very open and they also psychic and believers in ET civilization, but I didn't, and I don't know why. The last visit, this time it was different because I was with a group of kids and I had never been with a group of kids before. And we were saying goodbye and we were very, very sad. And we just watched the spaceship go away. And then I just had this understanding that, okay, it's time for me to do my work. But in 5th and 6th grade, I don't understand what that means. And so I think now I'm beginning to understand what that means. And then the visitations just continued, mixed with paranormal visitations. It was all like a mix, often as it is.
Did one trigger the other, or how did the progression begin?
I was more cautious of my psi abilities as a little child, and then the ET incidents started happening, and then they stopped. And then I was really focused on the paranormal and psi abilities, the Ouija board. I played ESP games with my father. We bent spoons, did all that kind of stuff. I learned how to meditate in 5th grade. My parents taught us how to meditate. And so I was very active in that world. I did automatic writing or channeling. I started when I was 16. And dead people started coming to me and all that kind of stuff. And I was enjoying it until I couldn't turn it off because I didn't realize you were in control. And then it came to a point where it just felt like I was awakened by dead people talking to me. I go to sleep, there's dead people there, there's dead people everywhere. And I was like, enough. I can't take anymore. Like nothing. I want nothing. Do not bother me anymore. But I would slide back into it and then it would happen again. And with age, I learned that I can control it. They're not in control. I'm in control. They're not in charge. I'm in charge. But it took me a while to figure that out. And it's a very important point with people who are in contact with otherworldly beings or supernatural beings to know that you're always in charge. And if you don't want to talk to a being, you just insist that this is not going to happen and you must go.
And that works.
It has worked for me. I came in contact with this astral men in black, and there was an energetic battle there, but I won because it realized that I was absolutely serious. With every cell in my body, it had to go.
And does it have to go because it's not good or because it's uncomfortable, or what's the reason it has to go?
It's different for everybody. With me, it was, I felt the energy, it was standing next to my bed and it was attached to a friend who was visiting. And when I felt its energy trying to come into me and kind of pull me out of myself, and that was not a good feeling. So that's when I was like, you have got to go because you're not giving me a good feeling. It's very important to feel love, to feel respected, and to feel like a calming presence when you're in contact with otherworldly beings.
So how do you know that? Like, so how do you know that that's something to compare, to say to yourself, wait, I should be feeling this? So have you had both experiences?
Yes, like that astral men in black was not a good feeling. And when I came in contact with the blues, they were extremely loving, so loving. And you just know by how you feel. You pay attention to the physical manifestations in your body, from the energetic transaction that's happening between you and the being. And so listen to your body. Your body tells you if this is right for you or this is not good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, is it right at all, even if you're feeling good, for them to come in and do what they're doing? And
Well,
but my other question is too, like, you know, it, do you think, let's build on this. So
okay.
are they scientists? Are they humanitarians? Like, what's the deal here?
Oh, it's a mixed bag. And
Yeah.
I can really only talk about the experiences that I've had, and I've had a mixed bag of
Hmm.
experiences, from grays that felt like they were kind of robotic, to the blues that are just extraordinary, beautiful, and loving and kind, and have given me a lot of information. I also have MILAB memories that I'm just newly talking about publicly. And in these MILAB memories, one of them, some of them were neutral and some of them were not pleasant. But in this neutral memory, I was in a room, looking into another room, and what was dividing the two rooms was a glass wall. And there was a guy standing next to me. And in these MILAB experiences that I have, they're all conscious memories. They're young men. They look military type, just black colored shirt and black colored pants, and everything is just black colored and really short hair, and they're pretty young, and they all look the same. And as he was standing next to me, a tall gray was brought into the room, and I was told, "This is the first gray." And then they took that one out and they brought in a medium-sized gray. And the man said to me, "This is a hybrid of the first one." And they took that one out and they brought in the smaller one. And he said, "This is a hybrid of the first one." And with each one,
Wow.
I sensed a lessening of sentience or self-awareness.
Have you expanded, I'll use this phrase broadly, have you expanded your mind since having these experiences? Do you feel like your consciousness has opened up in any particular way?
Oh, very much so. First of all, your awareness broadens from you're off planet. You realize that we're part of a galactic community and we matter. And we're not allowed to play with the neighborhood kids. We're something, our parents are keeping us in. They're like, "No, you can't play with the kids on the other planet. One day we'll be able to play with each other." And so when you have that awareness, it brings to you the ability to look at this 3D experience from a higher perspective. And that gives you the ability to actually maneuver around as a human being in a little happier way.
Hmm.
Because when you look at things from this higher, broader perspective, you tend not to take things as personally. You realize everyone has filters. And you realize also that you are creating your reality. So what is in your mind, that's manifesting.
Okay.
And so these are all the benefits that I have gained from my interactions with the ETs. I do say that my therapist is an alien.
Yeah, that's funny. I don't know if I'd want that, but I mean, if it works for you, we have a question from Android Purity in YouTube chat. Does she think that energy was extraterrestrial or spiritual? Like, what's your distinction, Sev? Okay,
Different
Sev.
types of energies when I use energy.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
because oftentimes we get this sense that they're some almost ethereal, that these are beings of a consciousness that's not, what you would typically imagine as a physical ET. So I think they're maybe looking for a distinction there.
mhm. There is a distinction. There's a variety of types of beings. There's an infinite amount of beings. There's an infinite amount of dimensions.
Hmm.
And so you can come in contact with a whole bunch of different otherworldly beings. They can be more of a light being. They can be maybe just a consciousness, maybe just
Yeah.
an orb. Orbs can be a variety of things, so
Hmm.
many things. And then you can also have contact with something that's more 3D or more flesh and blood. And it runs the gamut between all of that. It's endless, really, the possibilities.
So obviously, having watched the documentary, I mean, you notice that Tiffany Mack mentions, on one occasion it's like these orb-like things, on another occasion it's this pink-like alien, another time it's a gray alien, um, and that she was able to say to them, if she wasn't feeling so great, like stop
Yeah.
this, and then she would get this sense of peace that would kind of come
Mm,
over her, which is really really fascinating. And
mm,
in my mind as of late, I've been thinking about this: is are they so advanced that even if they aren't loving beings, can they use some kind of technology to mimic brain waves and kind of force a sense of peace, or force like a sense of love onto the abductee? um or am I wrong, and that love really is something you can't uh, m- uh mimic?
mm. Yes, that's a very good point. Can we create divine energy? Uh, I don't think we can
Mm.
man make divine energy. And as far as beings that can manipulate our minds, yeah, that's very, very possible. Very, very
Mm.
possible. What I like to do is look at how the experience manifested in my life. So I have an experience, and then I look at the quality of my life afterwards. Is the quality of my life nice? Is it better? Is it loving? Okay, then that was a good experience. And if it was just a matter of just brainwashing me, it would not affect my whole entire system. And then I would not have the manifestation of a positive life or a positive feeling, or just any kind of boost in happiness afterwards. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. Um, but why would we need these exoconscious beings to help us? I mean, can we not get to healing through meditation, and otherwise? What purpose are they really? Do you think they're really serving? Um, when you hear about hybridization, it's like, okay, there's some kind of scientific experimentation going on. That's like a reason I can wrap my head around. But other than that, like, why do we need them at all?
Well, do you want to live authentically? Do you want to know the truth, or do you want to hide from the truth? The truth is, there are other beings out there, advanced civilizations out there that are in contact with us.
Hmm.
So if you want to deny that, that's up to you. Uh, and what can they do for us? They can heal us. They give us spiritual guidance. They help us in many, many ways. The most important, expanding our consciousness and expanding our awareness, because
Hmm.
it's really important to exist with a high frequency. And what activates or increases your frequency, the number one thing is awareness.
Hmm.
And then from there, focus and practice and lifestyle. There's many different things, but mostly, why wouldn't you want to interact with the rest of the world? It wants to interact with you. So why cut it off? Why cut yourself off from that? Uh, because it's like just sticking yourself into a cave, and what good is that for your spiritual growth, your life purpose?
Yeah. What have you seen that defied physics, defied our understanding of reality?
Mm. What have I seen with my 3D eyes?
Hmm.
Okay. So when the two blue beings came into my living room in the middle of the day and sat on my couch, and I saw them very clearly. I took a
Hmm.
picture, actually. They did not come out in the picture, but I could see them very clearly. And we were having telepathic communication. In almost all of my instances, I've had telepathic communication. That defies what we know to be real in the 3D world. Also, I woke up in the middle of the night and there was this light being standing right next to the bed looking at my then boyfriend. It's beautiful golden light being. And when
Hmm.
I took my head off the pillow to make sure I was awake, and I'm blinking and I'm looking at it, and then it saw me and then it blinked away. So the ability to see these beings that are kind of like see-through and that can talk
Yeah.
to you telepathically, yeah, those are shocking because they defy what we think is real.
Right. And I just love your cat, by the way. This is
Yeah.
I love when pets show up on camera.
Yeah.
So can you use your intuition, your psychic abilities to communicate with your pets or with animals?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we all can. And actually, I have two black cats. At one point, I had three black cats,
Hmm.
and two of my black cats came to me in ghost form or in dream form first before they actually came into my reality. So
Hmm.
they popped into my awareness, letting me know that they were going to show up. And yes, they've also talked to me in dreams. One night I was dreaming. This is when I was living on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and
Hmm.
I had a dream that my cat Zulu was locked in a closet. So I woke up and I called her name and there was no answer, and I knew exactly which closet it was. And I went downstairs. There's many closets, but I walked right
Hmm.
to the closet. I opened the door and she came out. She was locked in the closet. And she
Well,
told me while I was dreaming.
that's
She's
insane.
done that
Yeah.
before. I was out doing errands. I had just left the house, and this voice goes, "You have to go back." I'm like, "I just started." And the voice says, "You have to go back." So I went back. I walked in. Usually Zulu was there to greet me. No Zulu. I'm like,
Hmm.
"Zulu." And I just hear this muffled meow from once again the closet, because she was all black. She would go into the closet and I wouldn't see her and I would shut the door.
Yeah.
So she called me back. And these are just a couple of many stories that almost all of us have. If we're pet owners, we all have these kind of stories.
Yeah. I have a great question again from Android. Has her cat reacted to any of these energies or
Oh,
experiences?
yeah. Thank you, Android Purity, for asking your questions. Yeah, when you see a dog or a cat staring off into the corner, and I've seen that a lot. One time I was at my girlfriend's house. I was babysitting her cats, and her cat and I were sitting on the couch. All of a sudden, I'm so glad the cat was there because the cat was my validation. All of a sudden, we both look over, both of us at the same time, look over to the corner, and both our eyes are like looking at some kind of energy that's coming like this and hovering right in front of us. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at the cat, and the cat's looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, okay, I know I'm not imagining this because the cat and I are looking at exactly the same thing in
Yes.
exactly the same direction.
Yeah, they can see all kinds of things from the
Yeah.
tiniest insect that we can't see to, something else. And sometimes when you the love of my life is delivering Maya to the stage. But this is Maya for everyone who is unfamiliar with our baby right here. Since we're doing
Oh,
cat hour. So yeah, she's a tuxedo cat. She was
that's
adopted and rescued in Brooklyn. If anybody was curious. But yeah,
adorable.
cats can do that thing where they stare at something, right? Exactly. And they'll stare sometimes in your general area as if they're looking at something and you're like, what are you,
Yeah.
what is it? What's,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you're familiar with Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance theory. The idea that there's this kind of force that is, like a field ever present, and it kind of, we can tap into it. It can shape, even genetics and how we evolve and all this kind of stuff. So, with all your experiences that we've discussed so far, do you think that there is a sort of force? Yesterday was May the 4th. So may the force be with everyone tonight. But do you think that there is a force that's like a real thing that we can one day discover, that you're tapping into, that these beings are, I guess, imbuing ideas about to you?
Yes, for a force that other people would call God, that kind of force.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, there's a force. I don't believe it's judgmental. I think it's completely neutral. And I don't think, for instance, it's really popular to say, I'm asking the universe for something, which is basically saying I'm asking this force for something. But
Yeah,
I
me
don't
too.
believe
Yeah.
that this force is going to determine what you're going to get. You're going to determine what you're going to get. So let's switch it from saying I'm asking the universe to I'm asking myself. It's the same force, but once
Yes.
again, when you're thinking that the universe is going to give you something, you're putting yourself in almost a victim position. If you don't get it, it's because the universe didn't give it to you, or that you,
Yeah.
or the universe that you shouldn't have it. Those kind of mind games we tend to play with ourselves, because we just forget that we're creating everything. We're creating the universe. It's not the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I know it always comes up in conversation, the double slit experiment, but it's like, this is crazy land, like, and scientists accept this, right? Like, that's craziness, that looking at something or looking away from something can change the behavior of a photon. That's beyond anything that we're talking about tonight, it seems, right? And so there's something certainly about the nature of reality, and I think you're right. There's a it's a very tricky place to get to, and then people spend years meditating trying to get to this place. But I think that you're right. It's all one. You are the universe. Universe is you. But I think that when you speak in terms of, like, for me, it's the universe with a capital U. Whatever that is, I don't know. But if I use that term, it gets me out of my own head a little bit. So it kind of helps you get out of ego, um, and you kind of find that place of humility. I think that's like the middle ground is where you can kind of tap into it the most. Do you think that when you get there, that tapping into it, you are actually able to manifest your desires, your path?
Yes, and because of the quantum principles that you just talked about, the observer effect, where the observer is creating the result. So, what are we observing? What are we constantly seeing with our mind? Are we seeing what's wrong with our lives, what's missing in our lives, how small we are, how we're not enough? Is that what we're constantly seeing? Well, according to quantum physics, that's what you're creating. So switch what you're seeing, switch what you're seeing in your mind's eye, switch what your mind is seeing, and then you'll manifest that. It sounds easy, but it kind of is and it kind of isn't, because there's so much deprogramming that has to take place before we start to believe that we can actually create our reality. It's just so hard for us to believe that.
Well, because we're also spending so much of our energy just working on our everyday character defects or whatever life is throwing at us. Like, we're dealing with all this stuff all the time, and then we want to talk about, mastering cosmic forces. It can seem overwhelming. But that's why we're here, and that's why we talk about it, because I think the very act of talking about it one helps us kind of keep focused and stay on track. But I think in a sense, it's like a subtle manifestation of making that reality come true. Of all the extraterrestrial, I'm going to use the term exoconscious beings you've encountered, is there one in particular that you have I don't know, like a deeper relationship with?
Well, there's two.
Hmm.
The first one would be the Grays, because they're the first ones that taught me a huge lesson in that my perspective is everything. Because I used to play the role of the victim. I've been
Mm.
married twice. There were abusive marriages and other things, and so I just assumed that the Grays were abusing me too. And through my interactions with them, I realized that is my warped perspective. Once I changed my perspective, I saw that the Grays were actually helping me, they were healing me, and they were guiding me. So they have a
Wow.
special place in my heart. The other being that I just love to be around and to communicate with are the beings that I call the Blues. And they're tall, and
Yeah.
I can't even draw them because they just look like kaleidoscope, constantly moving streams of light. And there are shades of blue and
Yeah.
silver and a little bit of green that flashes right here. And they're just exquisite.
That's so interesting. It really makes me wonder if you and Tiffany Mack are experiencing, the same thing, same beings.
Mm.
Eh,
But she
yeah,
had a pink being. I don't
she
recall a
did.
pink.
Mm.
Yeah, so that caught my attention when she said that. I'm like, pink? You usually don't hear about pink beings or
Yeah.
words or really, yeah. So,
Well, the way she described it was more almost like a pink glow, like a pink light. That's the way I interpreted, her explanation of it. Are you drinking coffee? All
I'm
right,
drinking
cheers.
a latte with oat milk.
That's awesome. I love it.
I'm usually asleep now. It's 10
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah. See, I know I shouldn't be drinking, coffee late, but having these conversations and not drinking coffee just doesn't go well for me. Um, it just feels right this way.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, well, cheers to you. I'm glad to have a fellow coffee lover on the show.
Mhm.
Um, so okay, so these blue beings, what's their purpose, and what do they want from Sev, from you?
Well, it's my desire to communicate with them. So as long as I have that desire, they'll show up. And I'm beginning to realize that I I'm a spiritual counselor, and I conduct soul purpose readings and soul support sessions and experience to
Mm.
reveal sessions. And so I deal a lot with helping people. I have clients all over the world discover their soul purpose, help them manifest it, and just kind of put them on track to finding fulfillment and abundance. And so I deal a lot with soul purpose, soul purpose, soul purpose. We all share the collective soul purpose of loving as much as possible. We all share that purpose.
Sure.
Uh, and then the hardest part is loving yourself. And so the individual purpose is really, how do you most show love? How do you radiate love the most? What is it that when you're doing, you radiate love the most? We could call that your soul purpose.
Mm.
So for some people, it's healing. For some people, it's being an innovator. For some people, it's being a teacher. For some people, it's being an entertainer. Whatever it is, that's your soul purpose, because you're supposed to come here and radiate love.
Yeah.
So when I think of my soul purpose, I believe that I'm here to radiate love. How do I do that? By engaging in things that are interesting to me and that activate the parts of my body, the parts of my mind that need activating. And for me right now, that is communicating with ETs.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, right now
It's
I'm really into it.
but we have, and I don't think that there's one love necessarily, or one way to express that love, because I feel like we have chapters in our life.
Oh,
And
yes.
this sounds to me like it's a new chapter for you.
Oh, yes.
But before that, what was your love, or how did you manifest your expression of love?
Well, that was a long, arduous journey, because I could never really pinpoint it, because I was in complete denial about my reality, because I refused to accept that I was having ET contact for decades, and all the signs were there. My true self, a very important part of myself, I was denying. So you can't just put that off to the side and then pretend like the rest of your life is going to be happy and normal and fulfilled. It's not. You have to face that, and then the rest of your life starts to fit in and starts to feel good.
Okay. And now here you are communicating. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did I answer your question, or did I just go off tangent?
No, you kind of did. And so here we are now. You're communicating with these beings, more than one. These blue beings in particular.
Yeah.
What are they? Are they giving you any positive messages beyond the metaphysical message? What does the future look like for Earthlings?
Okay, so that information was given to me by the Greys. When I had, it was, I think, in 2012, when I was living in Baltimore, Maryland, and I was shown a baby in a tube. And there were 3 Greys behind me, tall, medium, and short, before I even knew they came in different sizes. And they were telepathically telling me, we're just going to stand back here while you look at this baby in the tube, take all the time that you want. I did not understand why I was looking at this baby at all. A few years later, I'm in Roswell, New Mexico, and something happens. I come in contact with the Greys, and this time they're giving me information about the hybridization program, and they remind me of that baby in the tube. And they also tell me that we are on the path of self-destruction, but it's not too late to turn around. It's still not too late. And the reason the hybridization program is happening between the Greys and the human beings, as the Greys are telling me, is just in case we do annihilate ourselves, then these billions of embryos that they've created to be very loving, very sympathetic, very empathetic, very smart, very psychic, will be used to reseed the planet. So they're being held off to the side. There's still hope for us, though, is what they say.
That has to be, I think, one of the best explanations I've heard for the alien abduction phenomena, and particularly the harvesting. Because it seems a very practical thing to do. Like, my goodness, why would they be doing this to us? Well, we do that similar things to plant life. We have, I think was it Switzerland or Sweden? There's the plant bank. And we're trying to save life from going extinct on this planet today, but that often includes intrusive actions on our part in order to save that species in the long run. This makes sense. It's like, how long are they going to be harvesting these embryos for, and why? Well, that makes sense. I mean, maybe the goal is to have 1 billion. We don't know what that could be, how many they want in their banks.
They told me there's
really
billions, because there's millions of people involved in the hybridization program, most of whom don't know it.
Okay.
And so this takes us to the ET experience, the ET contact experience. It doesn't happen just in ET. It's a multidimensional, interdimensional experience. And there actually is, so it feels like a dream, but it's not a dream, because the brain has a hard time labeling it, or society has not really given respect to these kind of experiences that we have that are beyond 3D, and they're real experiences. And there's also an interesting shift. I'm a MUFON field investigator for North Carolina, and I'm also on the executive committee of the Experiencer Resource Team. And this is a group of people. There's about 50, 60 of us around the world, and we deal only with people who contact MUFON that have had direct contact with an ET. And these are really fascinating stories. And there seems to be a shift from a 3D event to more of a multi-dimensional, interdimensional event. That could very well be because, as a society, think of who was doing yoga 30 years ago as to who does yoga now. Think of who was meditating 30 years ago. Almost everyone's meditating now. And so we have pushed our boundaries. We've pushed our boundaries of reality. And so it could very well be that that is why we're most of the ET contact is happening in that realm, because we can see it and feel it better than ever now.
Interesting. Okay. Is that like another way of saying the veil is thinning?
Yeah, there's lots of veils. Yeah, one of them.
One of them. Oh God. How many more veils do we have, Sev?
A lot. It
Oh
depends on,
gosh.
yeah.
Okay. Well,
And
speaking of that, then, like,
I'm sorry.
well, I was just gonna say, what other veil do you think is next important in line for you? Like, what's that other mystery, that other secret that you think we should pay attention to?
What is a secret mystery that I would like an answer to?
Or that you think we should pay more attention to? Something that's typically hidden from us that maybe you've peeked into through your experiences.
The power of your mind.
Okay.
The power of your mind. And one thing that ET contact often provides information. And the government knows this, and the government knows who the experiencers are. And often we're debriefed. And this is what MILAB or MyLab often is. Because we're given information about technology, about the future, about the hybridization program, spiritual information, and self-empowerment information. This is what's so important, is that you don't have to follow the guidelines of what the government wants you to do. You don't have to follow the guidelines of this fake societal fairy tale of what a successful life is, or who you're supposed to look like, or what you're supposed to do. And that's the beauty of this ET information. It makes you realize, oh my gosh, I can totally be myself. Like, I can and still be successful and still be happy, still have friends, still have a romantic partner. I can still have that. So people are starting to jump out of that kind of matrix of thinking.
Yeah.
All designed just to like have this big thumb on the top of our heads.
You know what? It's interesting.
I would like everyone to realize.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because there's a little bit of a paradox, almost a contradiction, that we hear that the pandemic and the virus was, a conspiracy theory, and there's various explanations for what that is, but if that's so, maybe the unexpected side effect was exactly what you explained, because that's what I see a lot of. A lot of people going, I can free my mind from. I was plugged into this society thing, and now I'm unplugged and I can see things. I can see who I am. I can see what I want. So it seems very uncabal, like an effect. So I mean, maybe it was an accident, unintentional, but it's like, I think that's a really beautiful that people have had that experience despite all the death. I mean, we were in New York when this was starting, and our friends were nurses, and it was very real. People are in hospitals and they were dying, and the nurses are working crazy hours, stressed, emotional. I mean, it was not easy. But there was a flip side, and there was some positive things that came out of it. And I wonder, does it take extreme circumstances to get us to that place as a society? Is that the way we have to do it?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So everyone has, a line in the sand, and for everyone, it's in a different place. And for instance, for me, I had to have 2 red X's burned into my hiney cheeks. That's what it took for me to wake up. Not everyone has to have something that dramatic. So something dramatic did have to happen to society, because there was a yearning within the collective consciousness for a transformation. There was that yearning. And so that yearning was answered in this horrible kind of way. The yearning for the transformation that you were talking about.
So the yearning, so in a sense, so it's kind of back to manifestation in a way. So the yearning created, inadvertently, not directly, but created this situation that we found ourselves in.
Yes. And also the yearning to transform and to just find a more peaceful way to exist means that we have to look at all the ugly things. We have to look at the ugly things. We have to expose them, and we have to allow those ugliness of volcanoes to erupt. And that's also happening in every arena that we can possibly think of. I mean, we're
Right.
just
Yeah.
everything that we really don't want anymore has to be like show up in our faces. We have to identify we don't want it, and then we have to eliminate it. And we could see a lot of this coming. Like Putin completely just left alone. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? It's a crazy man. Like, okay, just stay over there. Okay, just stay over there.
And that never works out. That never works out at all. It never works out in high school. It doesn't work out on the big scale. So I'm gonna squeeze this last question in here thus far before we have to go. So Rodrigo says, questions: are those experiences that you're having in the conscious realm or unconscious realm?
Well, thank you for your question, Rodrigo. Everything that I talk about is a conscious memory. I have had regression, but everything that I really talk about, all my experiences are conscious memories, if that answers your question. I'm not telling you anything that came up under a regression.
I think that does. Yeah. I think that means that your conscious mind, your prefrontal cortex is processing something. Right? And that's the question too, because you talked about these blue kind of like amorphous beings. And it reminded me of when people are in either like transcendental states of meditation or psychedelic experiences where they're experiencing encounters with really bizarre entities. And to me, that tells me something's going on within the consciousness. That's where the phenomena lives. And so I'm always like in the first hour, I was asking Don Schmitt about this too. It's, and he thinks that this is a nuts and bolts 3D, the grays are nuts and bolts 3D extraterrestrials that are from another planet visiting us. He's not closing out ideas and for other explanations, but he believes that to be true. But could both be true? Can it both be a physical and I don't know, another dimension, another level of reality at the same time?
Yes, because there are beings that exist in all the different dimensions. And when I told you about my MILAB memory, when they showed me the tall, medium, and short, well, the short one was was a 3D version of the taller one. With the short one, the little one was I sensed was built so that it could move around in our environment.
Interesting. And they were so working in tandem.
Yes. So it was as if the tall one couldn't comfortably survive in this environment. So they made a hybrid to survive, and then they had to make even a more robotic hybrid. So these little ones that many people see are like the scientists. They're here to take samples. They just take samples, and that's what they do. And
Do you think,
medical things.
are they self-aware, or are they more like robots?
From my experience, the tiniest ones are not really self-aware. The tall ones are, the middle ones were kind of, but these little ones really were not self-aware. Like the sense of I am was not really there.
Wow. Okay. Sev, we only have a few minutes left. If you can leave us with a thought, an idea that we haven't covered that you'd like to share, what would it be?
Yeah, an idea that we haven't covered. An idea that we haven't covered.
Or words of wisdom, whatever it might be.
Okay. Well, I think the most important thing that I would like to impart on everyone is that it's important to live authentically, and whatever that means to you, to embrace your beliefs and to do what makes your heart radiate love the most. And when you start to do this, and it could be a very, very scary thing to do, because I didn't want to do it for decades. I didn't want to be the real me. And my life was screwed up because of it. But once I came out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the real me. This is the real me. Life dramatically changes. So that's really my biggest point, is just be who you want to be. Don't be who your mom wants to be or who your husband wants to be. Just be who you need to be. And your life will manifest as you want it to.
Yeah. So you find the flow when you're genuine, when you're authentic.
Yes.
Cool. Sev.
You know what that feels like. You do that.
Yeah. I have moments, moments. It'll be great if we can get to that place where it's like that all the time. But Sev, do you have any events coming up that you'd like to share?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm very honored that I'm the Master of Ceremonies at MUFON's International Symposium in Denver in the beginning of July this year. And my website is planetsev.com. I help experiencers around the world. I help them through MUFON, but I also help them individually. And if you are an experiencer and you need some help processing, please contact me through my website or my email, sev@planetsev.com. And my book, You Have the Right to Talk to Aliens, is on Amazon. I have a YouTube channel with lots of videos about all kinds of stuff. And I'm on Facebook and on Instagram.
All right. Sev, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
It was fun. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Alan, I loved it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sev. All right. Have a good night. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I was really happy to have Sev on as a guest tonight. It was really a great conversation. It's certainly refreshing. And much gratitude to Sev for her comments about Half-Light. I really, really do appreciate that. And for anyone out there who is an experiencer or is passionate about the paranormal, on this channel, Paranormal Pop, just Saturday, we premiered the Half-Light documentary, if you want to go and check that out. That's it. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on the Paranormal Pop YouTube channel, rebroadcasting Friday nights at 2 a.m. on KUNX, the UNX network. Until next time, everyone, live in the mystery.